Hello and welcome to my bedroom. Let me just start off by saying thank you so much for being here. I have received tons of positive feedback on my first two videos, and I really appreciate you taking the time to engage with me on what I would consider to be difficult topics. It really means the world. If you are new here, my name is Summer and I used to be 400 pounds. I am losing weight to better my life, so I have a lot to say about weight loss. Today, I have a lot to say about how I lost my first 85 pounds and how I started this whole weight loss escapade in the first place. As a side note, and I really couldn't tell you why, but I don't love calling this a journey. If I had to guess, I would say that I think it feels too plain to represent how demanding and intricate this process really is, because I don't really see weight loss as something that I'm just going through. It's something that I'm actively taking part in. This is so much more than a journey. I am single-handedly taking out Voldemort over here. So if you have any ideas on what I could call this time in my life, please let me know in the comments. Getting into the video, this one will be broken into the 3 areas of my life that I had to completely overhaul to make weight loss a lifestyle change that would stick, no matter how long it took. And boy, is it taking its sweet time.
That's okay, take your time.
Disclaimer, I am not a doctor or a medical professional in any way. Everything I'm going to share with you is just my opinion, so please do what's best for you. Another disclaimer that I don't think enough people talk about is that weight loss is going to require dedication and maximum effort for a while. At least in my experience, I have found that weight loss has to be a conscious choice that I work on every single day. Eventually, you will reach the point where you can rely on your habits because they will become second nature. But until then, it's going to require a lot of upfront work to build those habits. But that's okay, because sometimes you have to dig deeper to find what you're looking for. One last note before we get into it, these are just the things that I found through a lot of trial and error work for me. What I did may not work for you, but please don't get discouraged. For now, maybe hearing some of these things will help you form your own path forward. Now, let's get into every single shift and change that I had to make to finally start losing the weight. The 3 areas of change surround mental and emotional well-being, physical activity, and food and nutrition. Or as I like to call them, my deathly hallows. My weight loss hallows, if you will. Master all 3 and you will become the master of weight loss. And yes, I'm done with this analogy. I'm so sorry. But let me tell you right now that the mental and emotional section was the hardest for me and had the most involved work, so we are going to start there. No waiting until the end, we are getting into the nitty-gritty right now. I'm going to run through these in quick succession, but just know that each time I implemented a change, I gave myself a couple of weeks or even months to fully adopt it and see if it actually worked for me. So please keep that in mind as we go through these. The mental and emotional section. The very first thing that I did when I started this round of weight loss was make an agreement with myself. I told myself that this was the last journey that I would be going on. That any change that I wanted to make with the intention of weight loss had to be something that I could picture myself doing for the rest of my life.
Would you like to stay for dinner?
Would you like to stay forever?
If I couldn't see myself eating a certain food or a certain way for the rest of my life, I knew that it may not be worth trying. And this has helped me immensely in avoiding fad diets. This is a lifestyle change, a way of changing my eating habits forever. And I think that goes hand in hand with when people say you have to learn to love the journey. The journey and changes are forever, so learning to love them is to align yourself with who you are hoping to become. It is so easy to remain in the habit of calling yourself a binge eater or an addict. But if you could get out of that mindset and speak more kindly to and about yourself, it will do wonders when it comes time to actually making a change. The agreement that I made with myself went on to say that no matter how long this took, no matter how many times I fell off track and found myself wanting to start over, this would all be considered the same journey. That's it. I'm in it for the long haul and there is no quitting this time. And throughout this journey, I've had to frequently remind myself of this agreement. Every time that I wanted to resort to my old destructive ways, I would remind myself of my agreement and that quitting is absolutely not an option. In addition to this agreement, I told myself that I am now my own best friend, and any hurtful or negative thoughts that I had about myself were no longer allowed. That's not to say that I wasn't allowed to be sad or have any negative emotions at all. It is to say that when that negative voice that wanted to call me a fat loser failure after everything I did, even if it was something simple and unrelated to my weight or whatever, that I get to tell that voice to F right off.
You didn't win the prize?
No,
You know what that means?
no. What?
It means you have no skills and you're a loser!
And I'm serious, I would tell that voice to shut up out loud. I frequently used to say things out loud, like, you don't get to decide, I get to decide. Or, you don't get an opinion here. And I repeated that process for months until that voice did finally go away, because I was no longer listening to it. I think that this is the same way that I also got rid of my food noise, because I haven't had that in a long time. And that is an insane achievement that I didn't even know was possible. I thought that was just going to be something that I had to live with forever, but I guess we are growing, huh? The next mental shift that I implemented was my mentality around food. I frequently reminded myself that food would always be there. And just because I wanted something didn't mean that I needed it, especially if it didn't align with my goals. Treats are not inherently bad things whatsoever, but knowing when to have one as a conscious choice rather than giving into a craving is some of the hardest work that I have put into this weight loss stuff so far. In the same vein of no longer talking down to myself, I started to celebrate every single little win that I could think of. If I set a goal to get 1 subscriber and I got 1 subscriber, that meant that I was successful. I was a winner and I was on top of the world. This is the way that I started to slowly increase my gratitude for everything around me, because I have a lot to be grateful for, and I'm sure that if you look, you probably do too. I used to have such a hard time with negativity. Everything was a problem, and I was always the victim of my circumstances or my upbringing. I worked extremely hard to let this mentality go in favor of believing in myself, because I knew that half the battle of changing my life was just believing that I could. I'm a fiscal analyst by trade, so this next one might have been easier for me than most, but I started to view the number on the scale as just data. It did not get to dictate how I felt about myself. It was simply a measurement of my progress, a number to be analyzed when adjusting my goals. Your worth will never be determined by the number on the scale, but it can be such a helpful measurement and tool to track your progress. And that's all it really should be. Just like that negative voice in the back of my head that I used to tell to shut up. When it comes to the weight on the scale, I used to tell myself, it doesn't matter, it's just a number, and then over time that became true for me. This last one, though, was the hardest one to get through for me. I had to let go of the resentment that I felt over the loss of my youth. What I perceived as wasted potential due to the time that I spent hating myself and not becoming what I wanted to or could have been. It has taken me all 3 years of my journey so far to get over this. It was really, really hard. I used to lament often that I could have been somebody if only I hadn't been raised fat with low self-esteem. I really folded into my self-hatred back then.
6 folds, huh?
And I am so glad that it's in the past. The way that I got over this was constantly reminding myself that my parents did what they could, and that I used the tools that I had at the time to help myself through it. And even though they no longer serve me, all I can do now is the best that I can for my future. I still constantly remind myself that I am here now, the past has nothing to do with me, and the future will be better as long as I focus on today. I'm so sorry to say that there are no quick fixes for these mental changes whatsoever, but I can tell you that they are integral in believing in your ability to change for the better. So please start believing in yourself, whatever that looks like for you, and it will make the rest infinitely easier. Finally, my current mantra is, how you do anything is how you do everything. And I have no idea where I first heard it, but I do know that it has helped me push through so many times. On the days where I want to be lazy, and I don't mean on rest days that are important, I mean on days where I don't feel like showing up for myself, whether that be because I'm relying on old habits or using excuses. I remind myself of that mantra and of the person that I am trying to become and how she would show up for herself. Focusing on her usually helps me refocus and push through. I will leave you with this for the mental and emotional section. Focus on the solution and not the problem. As soon as you think of a roadblock, think of a solution. Do you have PCOS? How can you navigate that? Do you have health needs that others don't have or understand? How can you navigate that? If your journey looks different from anyone else's, how can you find the right path for you? Look at the path forward and not at what's blocking your way. It is a small shift, but I promise it does wonders. And this is why individualizing your own journey is so important. You can use my story as an example. You can use people on social media for motivation or inspiration, but your body and their body and my body are never going to look the same. Our journeys are never going to look the same. And what you have to do for yourself will be different from what I've done or from what anybody else has done. So make sure you are putting yourself first in that regard, okay? Up next are the food and nutrition changes that I made from the very beginning of my weight loss. I started with counting my calories and I gave myself an upper limit of 2,500. I know that might sound like a lot, but at 400 pounds, my calorie needs were really high. And implementing a gentle calorie deficit really helped me ease into the habit of being in one, much better than drastically cutting my calories ever had. Honestly, I didn't change a single thing about my eating habits, I just implemented the upper calorie limit. I could continue to eat whatever the hell I wanted, it just had to be within that limit. I did this, however, knowing that I would eventually be changing my diet, so I did have that in the back of my mind. This first change was really difficult to implement because I was overeating every day and binging very frequently. But taking a second to think about how that food would make me feel and what it would leave me with calorie-wise was the second that I needed to start to think about the food choices that I was making and to start heavily focusing on and reconsidering my long-term food choices. The next nutrition change that I made was to start drinking 4 cups of water daily, and eventually that evolved naturally into 8 cups. And trust me, that is plenty. I do not need to drink more. I don't understand the people who can drink a gallon of water a day. I actually tried it, and all it did was give me a stomach ache every single time. So again, that just goes to show that you should really be finding what works for you regardless of the current trends. The next change was that I started to cook breakfast daily at home. I no longer allowed myself to have any fast food breakfast except for on the weekends because me and my fiance like to spend some quality time getting breakfast and driving around. It's just kind of a thing that we do for quality time. When I got that down, I started to add veggies to my fast food orders and I started to omit certain parts of the fast food order that I used to get because I didn't think certain things were worth it calorie-wise. And I know this is about to be controversial, but one of those early cuts that I made was French fries. They were always cold and stale by the time I got home. Don't come for me in the comments. I just didn't think they're worth it, and I still don't. I haven't had a French fry in... No, I had one the other day, but it was my fiance's, okay? Stop. So for a while, I just kept cutting back on my fast food orders in general. Next, I implemented a calorie range. So instead of 2,500 being the one and only number that I lived by, I implemented a range of 2,200 to 2,400. I think that this was really essential in changing the way that I saw my eating habit. I did not at all have to reach that upper limit. That number didn't have to be the end-all be-all. I could stop eating anywhere on the range and still be just as satisfied had I reached 2,500. So if you are interested in calorie counting at all, I really recommend implementing a calorie range. It was getting consistent with my calorie deficit that really helped me realize what foods were triggers for binges. Noticing the different food habits that I had when it came to overeating versus binging was a big part of my early weight loss process. Some foods that I really enjoyed, I could easily overeat, like chips. But other foods would cause uncontrollable eating in massive quantities, like ice cream. I know that the ideas around binge eating are that restriction is what usually leads people to binge, and I do believe that is true for some people. But for me, some foods were triggers that were so strong that I absolutely had to cut them out while I focused on healing my eating habits. I ended up cutting out ice cream, Cheez-Its, and Oreos because I could not control myself around them. And identifying these trigger foods was the first huge step in overcoming my binging habits. And before you start to worry about what your future might look like having to cut out certain foods, I do have some good news for you. I have been able to incorporate an oat milk ice cream alternative, and I currently have 5 pints in the freezer that I have not once thought about overeating. And if you know anything about binging, that's something that seems impossible. But guess what? It's possible. The next change that I made was that I started to bring lunches to work. It was usually TV dinners, like lasagnas or lean cuisines, anything microwavable. The idea was that I would stop ordering fast food for lunch, so it got the job done. At least at the time, breakfast and lunch was no longer fast food. And that was a big win. Are you starting to see a pattern here? How I implemented changes slowly over time and how they all added up? More on that later. I ditched those TV dinners so fast and I started to focus on meal composition. I would make sure that my plate had a veggie, a protein, and a carb, and I started to weigh out my food in grams. After fixing my metabolism a bit with actually nutritious meals, I started to be able to track my hunger cues and determine the meal times that would work best for me. Currently, breakfast is 9 a.m., lunch is 1 p.m., snack is 3 p.m., and dinner is 6 p.m. It works for me, and it keeps me on track because I never have to wonder when the next meal is coming. It's just built into the plan. I don't have to give it any thought. Next, I started to make dinner more consistently at home, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm still working on this one. My fiance and I do eat fast food for dinner more than we should, but we are working on that. Next, I implemented a protein goal and I did my best to reach it every day. I found that it kept me satiated and naturally changed the amount of other foods that I was eating, which was kind of a plus. Finally, I started to realize that my hunger could be satiated with much less food than I was allotting myself, and that not every meal had to be a huge one. I found that my hunger and calorie needs changed daily. And so I started to eat smaller meals more often, and that is what I still do to this day. Can you see now why it has taken me 3 years to lose 85 pounds? I'm not knocking the progress, but a lot of people like to pretend that it should be fast and easy. It's neither, at least in my experience. But that's why I want to show you what a maybe more realistic journey looks like. Up next is the physical activity changes. At 400 pounds, my physical health was completely wrecked. Just the bottom of the barrel, the worst of the worst. But that's okay because we all start somewhere. At the time, I could not walk more than 10 minutes without hip, knee, back, ankle, and foot pain. If it was not one thing or another, it was a combination of all of them. I would get sweaty from standing too long. And this is about to be very TMI, so warning right now. But I could no longer reach around myself to wipe properly. It got to the point where I was grateful for shower days because sometimes I would go to the bathroom and then I would just get into the shower because it was easier to wash myself standing up than it was to wipe myself sitting down. And I absolutely hate admitting that, but it is part of the story. It is something that I lived with for several years. So I do feel that it's worth sharing, even if it makes me honestly sad about where it came from. I mention it so that you know that if you are anywhere near that point, you can come back from it. I came back from that, and so can you. So to get my physical health in order, I had to start small, and I mean very, very small.
The smallest you can think of.
For me, I knew that that meant starting with walking, and so I set a goal for myself to walk 10 minutes every day. And I don't even really mean a full 10 minutes. I allowed myself to set a 5-minute timer, and as soon as that timer went off, I was allowed to turn around and go home. Eventually, I did get stronger, and I very slowly started to increase my walking time. When 10 minutes started to feel too easy, I bumped it to 15, then from 15 to 20, and finally from 20 to 30. After I reached the ability to walk for 30 minutes, I started to notice that I could actually go a mile in 30 minutes, and so I started to track my progress in miles. And by miles, I really do just mean a mile, because that's all I could really do. But from 5 minutes to a mile is awesome progress. So each walk turned into 1 mile, and I would aim for 1 mile every weekday, giving myself the weekend to relax. Honestly, I wasn't the most consistent with my walking, but every time I did walk, it was usually a mile, so I will give myself that credit at least. To be honest, I hated walking so much, and that's so sad. But that's because I was always in pain. By the end of a walk, some mystery part of my lower body would be in shambles. But I never let the pain stop me. I knew that the only way to fix the pain that I was in was to improve my physical capabilities and to improve my overall health through fat loss. Of course, I think it needs to be said that some pain should be taken seriously as a warning to stop or slow down, but that is not the pain that I'm talking about here. And then all of a sudden, in September 2024, just this last month, I reached my next milestone of walking 2 miles in a row. And it just happened so naturally. I reached the end of my first mile, and I realized that I didn't want to stop, so I kept going. And I reached 2 miles, and it really wasn't that hard. I'm impressed. Since then, I joined a walking challenge at work for the month of October, and I have been walking at least 2 miles a day. Sometimes it's spread out, and sometimes I do it all at once. The key difference is that now I'm being consistent with my walks and it doesn't hurt the way that it did before. I actually really look forward to my walking breaks. And I do think that that is truly in alignment with the person that I am trying to become. So I am very proud of myself. And honestly, that is all I'm doing for exercise at the moment. I am just walking as much as possible. I do have future plans to start biking and maybe lifting weights around the 200s. And eventually, ultimate goal, I really do want to try out calisthenics, but I have to be at a much healthier weight to even start thinking about that. But starting where I did, I would have never made it this far had I not kept it simple. I built these habits very slowly over 3 years, and it has been paying off. And I don't foresee that slowing down anytime soon. Now, here's where I want to make a note about the timelines that I showed you. Each timeline was set within its own category and showed each change that I made in that category together. But that's not really how I implemented the changes. Working with the true timeline of events, here is the order of the changes that helped me lose 85 pounds so far. Honestly, I hope that this timeline can show why weight loss can be so difficult. There are so many intricacies to the personal needs and the personal changes that someone has to implement to completely reverse their lifestyle. But that's only to say that just because it's difficult does not mean it's impossible. You need to know what you're facing so that you can overcome it, but you are not supposed to let it hold you back. All you have to do is find your own way forward. You pick that first change and you start. In conclusion, the official message that I want to get across with this video is that you should implement small changes that you can see yourself doing for the rest of your life. Weight loss is a complete lifestyle overhaul that no diet or quick fix will help you achieve, especially if you always return to your old eating habits. Find what works best for you. These are all the changes that I have implemented over the last 3 years that work for me, but your personal needs are going to be your own. I think that you should explore your options. Find something to try that you can implement with the goal of building sustainable habits rather than the goal being weight loss itself. Because if you focus on the habits, the weight loss will follow. Remember that if you mess up, it is just a lesson to be learned. Find where you can improve next time, and I promise that the path forward will reveal itself. I had to go through so many iterations of my journey, reflecting on what did and did not work before I could make it this far. I did desperately want to share my journey from the very beginning so that people like me could see that it was possible, but at the end of the day, I am actually really glad that I didn't because I had no idea what I was doing, but now I do. And that's how I knew that now was the time to start sharing. Because I have learned so much just getting to this point, and I am now ready to take you with me because I still have 150 plus pounds to lose. That's still a whole nother person that I have to lose. So I'm excited to share this part of my journey with you. Journey. Please help me find a different word for journey. I don't like it. And don't forget to please subscribe so that we can reach our goals together. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.
So catch me if I fall.
This was an upper limit, calorie limit. Hello? Who wrote this? Whatever. I'm on page 9. This is going great. I did it 11, that script was 11 pages. So if you made it this far, you're a god and I'm a god. I have been wanting to, what is this called? Hunch. I've been wanting to hunch this whole time. Okay, I'm done. Bye.
So catch me if I fall.